Why is real estate a thing? You should just be able to market your property as a seller or a developer. Apparently, it's not that easy.
What's that magic behind Marbella?
The same magic that made someone like Audrey Hepburn come here. We nearly bought a house in the 90s that had belonged to her. The pandemic has been the biggest catalyst for the market. If you were a conspiracy theorist, you could say that COVID was invented by some Marbella estate agents. We had boom and bust. We depended on specific markets, mainly UK actually. When it sneezes, we catch flu, right?
They say the same about China these days.
Until recently, it was almost impossible to build anything new. They've just now started in Monaco. They're building something like Gibraltar. They build into the sea. It's the most expensive real estate in the world because you can't build new. So now millennials are the biggest spenders, especially on luxury items. They spend money more easily and they really spend it a lot. It's about experience. Shut up and listen.
In our discussion, we're going to focus on something very special, which is this time the luxury real estate sector. And we must agree that it has been one of the most intriguing areas in terms of development here at the Costa del Sol in Spain. My name is Dr. Cristina Soreg, and I'm an assistant professor here at Les Roches, coming with a background in economics and data analytics. And I'm very excited because today we have a special guest with us, Mr. Percy Roland, who is going to share his experience regarding the luxury real estate sector here in Marbella and at the Costa del Sol. It is a great pleasure to introduce Mr. Percy Roland because he has been a regular guest speaker for our students, sharing his knowledge and experience when it comes to luxury real estate trends and just an overall market evaluation. Percy comes with a 13-year experience in luxury real estate and also 18 years spent with public speaking and professional mentoring and coaching. Last year, in 2023, Percy participated at the TED Talk in Marbella, delivering a really interesting speech on the role of emotions and desires when it comes to taking decisions, and that's something really, really exciting. But also, he has been involved in his own business entrepreneurship because he established the Percy Roland Real Estate in May 2024. So now the adventures are continuing at the next level. I'm very excited. I'm so happy to welcome you here with us in the studio. How are you doing, Percy?
Oh, very well. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
It will be definitely exciting. I prepared a couple of interesting questions for you, and we will just dive into it. So let me just start with a quote that is the following: if you want to live happily, go to Marbella. So this quote originally comes from Audrey Hepburn.
Oh.
And, well, you know what I mean, and the way we think about Marbella, it's something very, very different. But could you share with us what's the magic that is here in Marbella which makes more and more people take that decision to invest into a property, to start a new life, to purchase different assets here? What's that magic behind Marbella?
I think it's still, to a certain extent, the same magic that made someone like Audrey Hepburn come here. It's interesting. My father came down in the 60s, around the same time, and he never met Audrey Hepburn at the Marbella Club. But it was at that time, it was very it could easily happen, because you would walk. The beauty of the Marbella Club at that point was that it was basically a private home of Prince Alfonso, which he opened initially to his friends. And his friends were people like Grace Kelly, Audrey Hepburn, all these people, royalty. But, it was a different type. It was the original jet set. And at that time, of course, they all went to Côte d'Azur and Monaco and all these places, which were very fancy and very elegant. And you had to wear at least black tie if you were going out for dinner. And then he invited them to this little finca, basically, by the sea, which half the time didn't have electricity. And you could walk barefoot down to the beach, and in the evening he would ride to dinner on a donkey. Where you have these pictures of the parties they did at the Marbella Club. They were fantastic, and it was this very casual, relaxed atmosphere that people loved. And Audrey Hepburn, actually, we nearly bought a house in the 90s that had belonged to her.
You must be joking.
Yes, no. Well, it belonged to her husband, Mel Ferrer. He had several houses, and he bought that for her. It was up in Guadalmina. And when she saw it, she said, oh, no, I don't want to be here. It was in the middle of nowhere. It was like a farmhouse. And she bought one in what is now behind Puente Romano.
It is so
the
hard
most
to
beautiful
imagine.
house.
Wow,
Yeah,
wow.
it's
You
still
just
there.
take us back in time. And if you could switch, would you just go back in time? Would you
Oh,
be a real estate
absolutely.
agent at that moment of the
That
history?
maybe not, but I would certainly. Well, I don't know how much there would be to sell, but I certainly would love to experience that time. I mean, I only got to see Marbella in the late 80s, early 90s, like, as a little boy, and it still had a little bit this feel about it. It's not recognizable now. I'm not saying it's better or worse. It's different.
It's different.
But it's this very unique combination of a small Spanish village, and then this beautiful sort of all these tropical gardens, and it was done like old school Beverly Hills or something. You have that architectural style. It actually came back from in America. They called it Spanish Revival, and then there were some American architects who brought it back to Spain. And a lot of the villas that were built at that time in the 50s and 60s and so on, they were done in that same style.
That's remarkable.
And with the Moorish tiles and everything. And it was just, it was a very different thing. It was not sustainable. The world changes. And then you had the 80s where it grew. You had a lot of oil money coming in. You had a lot of dodgy people from the UK especially coming. Some of the old jet sets said, okay, we've had enough, like Prince Alfonso moved to Ronda and so on. But it still had that touch of old school glamour. And
that's so good to hear. Difference is always good, because if you think about this crazy development that has been undergoing since the 1980s, the 1990s, globalization, that people just travel all around the world, that they can have, the luxury of buying any property, a second home, wherever they want. It wasn't really available back then. So let me just continue a tiny bit with some interesting statistics about this area, because according to the reports in the first half of 2024, Marbella recorded over 2,500 properties sold. In terms of, if you check the marking a 10% of increase compared to 2023, it's really impressive. And it was 20% above the 10-year average. If I continue with some other interesting information, we can see that property prices, they have continued to increase despite the pandemic, despite the economic crisis. And per moment, the average is around 4,600 euros per square meter. So can you share us what's hot now about Marbella? What about the luxury real estate scenery in here? Anything that you would call as a trend, which is happening right here, right now? What's hot about Marbella?
Everything. It's interesting you said despite the pandemic and the economic crisis. I would say because of. The pandemic has been the biggest catalyst for the market here. In fact, if you were a conspiracy theorist, you could say that COVID was invented by some Marbella estate agents, just to get the market going.
Sounds real, yeah.
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. It's interesting because the market here used to be extremely cyclical, which is logical because we were a resort second home market.
Absolutely.
And to a certain degree, I don't want to be rude, but a bit of a retirement place. All right? We were. 20 years ago, you were hard-pressed to find any young people living here.
Well, that must have been interesting.
Yes. It was a very different thing. So people came here, the typical buyer was a retired business person, family, coming down, but to buy a villa, play golf, etc., etc. And what happened, and it was very cyclical in the sense also that we depended on specific markets, mainly UK actually. And whenever the UK, it was what's this old saying? When the UK, well, it was another one, but when it sneezes, we catch flu,
Absolutely.
right? So,
well, they say the same about China these days.
Yes,
so I think,
I was China. Yes, of course. Yeah. So it was a similar kind of situation, and we had boom and bust. There was a big boom in the 80s, bust early 90s. Boom again late 90s, which went all the way with the 2007. Until 2007, it all came to a big crash worldwide. The interesting thing is that after that, most countries recovered fairly quickly. Spain did not. Okay, Spain was in a particular state, but this is not Spain. This is a market of its own. And the reason I think that it struggled, especially in the high-end market, which we generally look at in the Marbella area, the reason was that we didn't have the right product. There had been a generational shift in buyers. buyers were, it was a new generation, younger people who had a totally different taste, different expectations, different needs. They wanted big, modern, open plan, contemporary properties, and we didn't have them. Add to that the rather unusual situation we have in Marbella, specifically with planning, which since the Gil years was completely blocked. You can't build.
Yep.
Now you can with difficulty, and hopefully next year it will be easier. But until recently, it was almost impossible to build anything new. So you could only take old properties and renovate them.
Wow,
So,
what a challenge. I
yeah.
imagine that was actually something,
You know,
a product market fit problem maybe?
yeah, well, it's always a product
Yeah.
market. I mean, the product ultimately, you can't have there's a buzz as well, but without the product, you don't have the buzz.
Absolutely.
We tried a lot of, the real estate community, let's say here, for I think many years, tried to create a buzz out of just marketing, and it didn't work. Because people looked at it and they said, well, this is all very nice. Marbella is very nice, but that house is 30 years old and has, the most basic qualities.
Yeah.
And sorry, no.
As
And
they
you're
say,
asking
if you
that?
have the best product, but no one knows about it, then there we go. Nothing will happen. The day
And
will
the
not
other
happen.
way around as well. If and everybody knows about it, but your product is not good. So it took several years until some investors came in, saw the potential. And, at the time people said, this is the worst thing for Marbella, we can't have new construction. And it actually wasn't. On the contrary. Why is Monaco or all the towns on the Côte d'Azur, why are they so extremely expensive? Because you cannot build anymore.
Absolutely.
They've just now started in Monaco. They're building something like Gibraltar. They build into the sea. It's the most expensive real estate in the world because you can't build new. So here it was the same. It was a blessing in disguise. And sort of 15, 16, 17, it started that investors, mainly from Scandinavia, took over the old properties, started renovating them in the style that the young buyers were looking for.
Oh, there we go.
So we started to have a market. And around 2017 it started. 2019 you could really see the beginning of a trend going up, and then...
Can I catch you here for a second? Because you were referring to the young people, and the first thing that comes to your mind if you think about the typical people of Marbella, if you're a tourist and you don't really have that much local knowledge, very flashy, very vibrant, very excessive, all the logos, all the brands, expensive cars, Ferrari, Rolex. Is it still a thing? Can we say that Marbella is still all about that type of a, let's say, average buyer, average customer? Or do we have a bit more of those entrepreneurs? Do we have a bit more of, let's say, diversity when you try to imagine, the buyer side of the market?
Yes and no. Because I would say some of the entrepreneurs you talk about also drive a Ferrari. We have both. It's not necessarily just the flashy kids who want to show off. Yes, we have those. Although I would say that a lot of the entrepreneurs and more serious people who are coming down,
the crypto tycoons, right?
Well, those two, but not everybody who has a lot of money is in crypto. In fact, nowadays I would say the opposite. No, but a lot of them also, as I said, it's a generational shift. It's a young generation of tech entrepreneurs and all kinds of different sources of wealth. People who want to enjoy their life and they want to enjoy it now. And this is where COVID also was really a major factor, because I think it really got this sense of YOLO, you only live once. Spend it now, you might be in lockdown again in 6 months, or you might be dead, I mean, I'm saying it flippantly, but a lot of people, were seriously affected by this. So, and mentally. And then there was the question, if I'm in lockdown in Stockholm or wherever, and it's all horrible weather, and I'm in an apartment, and for the same money, we didn't realize down here just how cheap in comparison life was. And real estate as well.
That's very true. I can confirm it as an economist, because normally we say that if you go to Spain or any other similar country that has amazing climate, beautiful weather, the most beautiful setups here, you pay here the paradise tax, because apparently the costs of living are a bit lower. Your earnings will not be the same as in Germany, Austria, or France.
No.
But in return, the quality of the life will be something next level. And I think that's the best part about Marbella. Do you agree?
Absolutely. But the thing is, and it still is in comparison so much cheaper, but here's the thing where a lot of people make the mistake that they compare, as you would in another country, you compare within the country. right? Now, Spain, still to this day, is a country with a far lower standard of living. If we standard, quality of life is something else. But if we're looking purely at numbers, if you look at average salaries, even in our region, and this is actually a worry now because we are beginning to have a huge wealth gap. But so the thing is, people compare also in the property market. And we used to do this. I used to do valuations all the time. My first job I had, and one of the main things was valuations. Valuations in Marbella are interesting because we don't have a register as you do in other countries, where you can just go and say, I know, the property in this street sold for X, and your neighbor sold for X. We don't have that.
So how does that happen then?
We try and get information from what we've sold, from competitors. We look at, generally, we have access, obviously, to what the properties were offered for, and then we say, okay, it's probably sold around 10% below that. It's
there we go.
Guesstimate.
Intuition.
Guesstimates.
Well, then you have to develop
experience
that
value.
intuition over the years.
But the interesting thing is, so we used to compare like with like. So what sells in this street and what sells in this town. And then we found that this new type of buyer doesn't compare so much with what is sold in the same street, but they compare with what prices are at home or in another city.
Rational. We are the most emotional things, and when we approach this whole thing from the terms of economics, it's something that we cannot really explain because our emotions and the way we compare things and pick our preferences, it's really far from being rational. We were talking about the market and the typical buyers, but there is something else what is really exciting for those who are here in Marbella, and that's the lifestyle. So my question is the following: what have you been experiencing with your potential buyers? What kind of lifestyle are they after, and do they expect you to somehow present that lifestyle towards them?
Yes, they do. They expect luxury, but casual luxury, relaxed luxury. Okay.
Can you specify it a bit?
They don't want very formal dining experiences, for example, like the kind you still maybe have in the south of France in some cases, or no, they want it very chill, very laid back. But at the same time, design, interior design, everything has become very important, especially this is a little bit, I would say, the Instagram effect generally in life. Yep. We see it everywhere. We see it in our homes, we pay much more attention to these things.
Do you have your corner at home, which is your home office corner? So if you have any meeting, you have the picture perfect backgrounds. Or you use a virtual background.
I wish. No, I don't use the virtual backgrounds because usually they don't work. I have a white wall, and actually I learned it's the best thing to do. I just turn my table around and I have the white wall behind me, so there's no distraction. But that's if I am at home. But I usually have a co-working place where I have a very nice background. No, but it has become a big factor. So restaurants, all kinds, any kind of service, it has to be nice. It has to be elegant. People like casual elegance, it's also the dress code of Marbella. In summer when you see everybody's in the linen shirts, and so it's that sort of vibe. So it's I would say understated, not so much bling. There is obviously a sector of the market also that likes the bling and that's mainly concentrated in Puerto Banús.
Absolutely.
But no, I say overall, and if you see now, if you see the trends in hotels. So
they want to be comfortable, but also stylish, and they want to project that kind of a feeling.
Yes.
That's really interesting. We were talking about the pandemic, but actually it brings me to the next thing, which is technology. And as a real estate agent, especially in the luxury sector, how do you work with technology when it comes to showing a property, communicating, or anything that, it was not really available before and now it's a must?
Well, I think the biggest game changer has been that everybody now is on social media. Real estate is very visual and it always has been, but in the past, the only way to really transmit a property was to be there.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
I remember the old days when you had, photographs, really printed out photographs in the shop windows, and then I remember when my father was looking, and he got offers by fax, and you had that photograph in black and white,
Low
and you
quality.
tried to see it. Oh my God, you couldn't tell what was the pool and what was the
yeah.
So. And it only started in, when it went online, that people from their home already in Sweden or Switzerland or wherever could see the property, at least on pictures.
Yeah.
But we still didn't have video, Then it started, and obviously once people started especially in marketing, to see the potential of if you really style the property perfectly, and if you light it perfectly, and then you have the daytime and the nighttime, and at some point drones appeared, and that was a total game changer. Now you can show it from above and from everywhere, and you can do the videos.
I have to be honest, because I'm following you on social media, and you have one of the most spectacular stories when you go to an open house or when you're just looking around, checking the property to be sold. And of course, it's true that images and videos never really show us the reality, but even from the perspective of a person who has no intention of buying it, it is spectacular.
And now imagine, that's just me walking around with my phone, which is old and I need to change it. And the video quality isn't the best. Just walking around and doing this. Now imagine, and a lot of this is another thing that has changed in real estate now. A lot of people are actually more influencers than estate agents, or at least the bigger companies. They hire people specifically, and there all the big agencies have dedicated marketing departments with videographer and drone operator and so on. And you go to the open houses and they're all going there with the equipment. You can almost not move because there's all this professional videography going on. But the quality of that, and this is what something. And again, I know I'm tiring about COVID, but that was the first time where people actually bought properties over the phone without visiting them.
That's very true.
But that would not have happened if they wouldn't have had that technology to be able to see it, And we're talking not about small properties, we're talking about up to 10 million and above.
So does that mean that you have to be a little bit of everything besides, a luxury real estate agent? Can you tell us anything, what would be, the trickiest part of your job? Some kind of a difficulty. And let me cite a really interesting person. If you were, you are always referring to that specific show on Netflix, Selling the Sunset. I'm trying to sell a dream, but I'm also living in a nightmare. That was coming from Chris Shell, one of the main characters of Selling the Sunset. Can you reflect on anything that is actually a challenge for you as a luxury real estate agent right here, right now in 2024 in Marbella?
Selling the dream but living a nightmare. I haven't heard that before, and I think that's actually really clever. It's not always like that. But yes, on a sort of day-to-day, you can really feel that way. Yeah, when everything is somehow just going wrong around you. Real estate is challenging. Actually, it's funny because you could ask yourself, why do we even have estate agents still? Why is real estate a thing? Because in theory, you should be able to, especially with all the technology we talked about, you should just be able to market your property as a seller or a developer. And then I find it and I buy it, right? But apparently it's not that easy. And it's a lot to do actually with the emotions we were talking about that get in the way. And so I think our profession is very much here to stay. But because it's such an emotional thing also to buy a property, people get very emotional.
Absolutely.
And to deal with that is tricky. Then on top of that, obviously, you're dealing, in our case, with people from 150 different countries, I think, in Marbella now.
Yeah. And who's more emotional? Is it the buyer or is it the seller? Because if I imagine that you have to put a certain price tag on something that used to be your home, it is impossible to forget about your emotions. And even if the market is not ready for the price that should be offered, a lot of people just cannot make up their mind.
Yes.
And then they reach out to the agent who's trying to talk some sense into them. Am I right?
Yeah, and then sometimes the agent gets emotional. No, I think if you're talking about private, like if it's a private seller who has lived in their home for a long time, yes, probably they're more emotionally attached. But that doesn't mean that the other side isn't. We have to define what do we mean by emotional.
Exactly.
Our decisions are driven usually by some kind of emotional trigger. The fact that I don't need a house in Marbella, right? Or maybe I do. But for most people, it's a luxury purchase. Like I want a Rolex. I want a Ferrari. I want this. That's an emotional decision in itself. I can go about it very rationally, but it's still ultimately it's a want. It's a desire.
I fully agree.
But when we're dealing with, as we do now a lot, with new developments or renovations done by investors, then the emotional side is more on the buyer side. But there's also you have so many challenges, legal challenges, and all kinds of things that go wrong, expectations, misunderstandings, and then the fact that as I was saying, with all the different nationalities and cultures.
That's it.
And they are coming to another country again that has totally different legal customs and so on. most clients don't speak Spanish. In fact, a lot of agents also don't speak Spanish. And then they have to deal with lawyers, and then they have to deal with paperwork, and then they find, oh, this was, it still has some embargo from 1982. Okay, how do we resolve that? We didn't know about that.
The skeleton in the wardrobe. Well,
yes.
I think those things cannot be avoided. But what is also a trend, as I have been seeing it, that more and more people are truly expecting sustainability to be behind it. And the luxury sector is becoming more and more sustainable. The two things together are a bit of a contradiction, because you're going for something excessive that is not available for an average client, an average person, but you also want to do something good, which is good for the planet as well. So can you tell us if you have more and more buyers who expect all about sustainability, eco-friendly solutions, or is it still about, the wow factor? You have the pool view, you have the palm trees, you have the beautiful. Which one is dominating?
I would say still more the wow factor.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the sustainability could often still be added on. Like, for example, you have a property. If it has some space somewhere, you could still add solar panels on it if you want it. I think the sustainability is definitely a factor, but I know this sounds okay. There are some people where it really is on the matter of principle. But I think for a lot of people, it is more a matter of self-interest. You have a big house, even if you can afford it and it's a luxury product, but still, you don't want to pay crazy money for the 3 months you're there for electricity, and maybe even for the 12 months or 9 months you are not there.
Exactly.
So then it became, and thankfully now we have a lot of things that we can do. Mm-hmm. But yes, if you specifically target the market that does care a lot about that, and I don't see that many developers doing it. We had one case of a house that was built actually during just before lockdown. It was sold during lockdown for a record price, and it was a passive house basically. It was the first super high-end luxury passive house. It's completely self-sufficient.
Yeah.
So there is a market for that.
I believe that Spain is a bit lagging behind.
We were
with
lagging
those
behind.
Trends.
We were badly because for years we had even a tax on solar energy.
Yes,
it was insane. And then it's thankfully changed about 4 or 5 years ago, and now we have subsidies and everything else, and that's just one factor. You have many others. But I think in the next 5 years or so, if I were now to advise anybody who wants to do new developments or who wants to do high-end renovations and so on, care a little bit more about the green factor. Not just, at the moment we have this big trend with brands, for example, or the branded residences. That's great, but I think I would rather invest a little bit more in the sustainability as well, because that is going to be, I think, more and more
It's definitely a niche, I would say, because if you think about just ordinary people, for some reason we associate sustainability with something expensive. It is really good, but we know that we have to pay the price for it. And those who are coming from the top, the cream of the society, obviously luxury for them is a tiny bit different than for an average person.
Yeah.
And it is quite possible that they believe sustainability is part of the luxury. If you think about the Generation Z, they absolutely care about those things, but the funny fact is that they're not so interested in possessing resources and assets. They want to move around. They want to be flexible. They don't need a car. They don't need a property.
Wait for 10 years and they get older and then they will want those things as well. We said the same about millennials, and now millennials are the biggest spenders, especially on luxury items. But with the difference, and this is why we see this boom now, they spend money more easily, and they really spend it a lot. It's about experience, right? They spend it, and I'm sure you have it also in the hospitality sector, you see it a lot, that people are willing to pay extra for experiences.
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
And for them, to a certain degree, having this property in Marbella, for example, is also an experience. They pay, and they're willing to pay this price for the experience of having it, sharing it with their friends. It's about being social, also about being on social media a little bit. And but sustainability, we always look at it like there's always like this big thing that we need to do, and it's like a sacrifice, but it's not. Making your property more sustainable makes it cheaper for you to run.
It has to become mainstream.
It will, and for purely practical thing. And I know in this business we always try to talk about just the beautiful things, and everything is wonderful. But I think everybody knows that we have an issue with water here, and we've had a drought for the past 5 years, which got to the point that this year we were not sure if we would be able to use pools or not. This year now we had an excess of water already, and it's been with tragic consequences in Valencia. Thankfully not here, but. in the long term, back in the day, every villa that was built had a well. They
Yep.
would dig a well, and you had your own private water supply.
People were so much better planners at that point, and now we're just doing the carpe diem, right? Let me challenge you a tiny bit. I have been reading a lot about how consumer and buyer behavior has been developing, and there's a concept which is called perm anxiety. It means that the humanity is actually in a very, very deep and permanent, let's say, mindset or status of always expecting some kind of a shock, some kind of a risk to happen in the near future. And it means that they take less risks. They try to really double check on the prices, on the alternatives. They are not really, looking for something that we do not really know what is going to happen about it in the near future. Do we see any signs of that in the luxury sector when it comes to real estate as well? Are people still struggling with that, feeling that what if the next COVID comes? What if this or that happens? What do we do then?
Certainly not in the luxury sector. No. If anything, the opposite. Maybe it will change. I don't know. But I think the interesting thing is, so we've had so many factors recently. I think maybe the average person on a salary, in a big city with limited perspective, even on a good salary, but maybe limited perspective of this level of growth, will feel that way. But we've had a lot of really traumatic events in the last few years. If you think about it, 20 years ago, we could not have imagined.
Absolutely.
It was like 9/11 happened, and that was like this big thing, like, oh my God, what has happened?
And then nothing.
And then nothing there were a lot. But now we've been hit with a global pandemic of a scale that, we haven't seen in 100 years. A war in Europe. A lot of conflict going on all over the world, which has had direct impact on us here as well. A lot of people have come here fleeing the neighborhood of that conflict.
For a low-risk environment in terms of doing business, living, for sure.
Yeah. And then on top of that, we've had these massive lifestyle changes in the fact that technology has made it possible for most people to work from anywhere. And 10 years ago, digital nomads, I remember of my first trip to Southeast Asia, you saw these people, with laptops, and they were like, oh, they're digital nomads. And they were like, people looked at them like freaks. And some of them maybe were. And now
What's going on?
Everybody is working. And even if you still live in your home city, let's say, where your business is, you're not going to be in an office most of the time.
Absolutely.
In most professions. So this is why people say, well, why should I be in miserable weather and everything if I can sit in the sun?
It makes sense. I'm also coming from a pretty cold country, from Hungary, Budapest, and it means that it gets dark at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and your brain just doesn't work in the same way as before. And you mentioned before during one of your guest speeches that you have more and more people coming from Scandinavian countries as well, and also from Poland. So I imagine it's also related to this perspective.
It's always been, I would say, beyond any other factor that we've been discussing. The one factor that has always made people come here and will always make people come here is the climate.
That's a non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. It's why, in general, why the Mediterranean has always attracted people for centuries. People have flocked from all over, to Italy, to Spain, to Greece. But we have probably we have like a microclimate, which is. Even I think now the classification has changed of the climate, like we are officially subtropical and not the Mediterranean climate.
There we go.
Because we have the warmest winters. Malaga is the city in Europe with the warmest average temperature in winter.
And I believe it also contributes to the fact that they start calling South Spain more and more as the Silicon Valley of Europe. If you just look at the companies that have moved recently, if you read a bit about the startup law introduced by the government, facilitating a lot of digital nomads, even outside of Europe, to come, not to struggle with the visas, tax deductions, etc. So more and more startups are coming from Spain as well, and looks like it's becoming a really, really beautiful hub for everyone who is trying to enjoy life, but also to make impact and disrupt a given industry.
Absolutely. This is another thing that happens. So when I said earlier that it used to be a bit of a retirement village, now it's because the only people who were working here basically were in hospitality or in real estate or lawyers. But it all was around, let's say, tourism, residential tourism. But now, no, we have Google, we have all kinds of tech companies in Malaga. We have, as a result of that, a lot of small startups coming. Some will last, some will not. But a lot of investment coming in as well. And these are people, obviously, who then also want, oh, if I'm coming here 2-3 times a year, might as well have a place here. I enjoy it. In the meantime, rent it out. It's not even, this is the other thing that, when we talk about trends, for example, when I started 12 years ago, and you were dealing with any kind of high-end property, they would never come on the market for rent. Even if the owner had 5, 6, 7 properties and used this for 4 weeks a year, they would not rent it out because this was their home, and their privacy was sacred. And, you can't just go in there, you have your private things and your art and everything else. Now, all the high-end properties appear on the rental market, short-term rental market.
Because if you think about the alternative costs of maintaining a property.
Exactly.
Wow.
So a lot of people, they use it for 2-3 months a year. The rest of the year, they rent it out. And it means basically that they have a property for free or even make money on it.
That's so exciting.
In the best case.
Well, I must say that your job is really extraordinary because you just have access to so many places that we just do not see behind the scenes. And could you just briefly tell us what would be the best part about your job when it comes to finding the perfect dream home for a very specific client? What do you enjoy the most about it?
I think the best part is what you just mentioned, the fact that you have access to these amazing properties. Yesterday I was invited to a private viewing of a just newly launched villa in Nueva Andalucía and Brisas. And it's probably the most beautiful house I have seen in, I don't want to say ever, but in many years in terms of design, qualities, everything. I am a bit picky, especially with details. Since I also started doing some renovations and projects and so on, I've become even more picky. This was so exceptionally beautiful. And I just really felt, it's easy to take it for granted. Once you're working in this, you're constantly invited here and there, and you see this, and it's the people you meet.
Yeah.
You have access to a level of people you wouldn't meet otherwise. But just to be able to see these beautiful homes, and I enjoy design, I enjoy interior design and so on. When I
love
see
art
that,
as well.
I love art.
Absolutely.
So it's very. That is very beautiful. And then also it's networking. You meet a lot of interesting people in the business and clients and so on. So
can we say that actually luxury real estate sector is, at the epicenter of it, it's all the human capital. Finding the right agent, finding the right clients, when you actually know how to address them, when you know what they want, even without them telling you what they want, and then you're doing the digging, looking for the perfect property. So to me, it just all goes down to the human capital.
Absolutely.
Which is you, the real estate agent.
Listening to you speak, I think you should consider a career change because
there you go.
But because you figured out what a lot of people take forever and sometimes never figure out, which is exactly this. And this is when we talk about emotions and desire and all that. It's a human factor. It's
fascinating.
The human. Okay. At the heart of everything, no matter how much marketing you do and how much you have a brand and how good your videos are, at the heart of it is the product, right? It still is ultimately it's a house. It's bricks and mortar and walls and floor, and it's a house. And it has to serve a purpose, right? But the house itself, beyond that, is what it can, especially when it's not a necessity, but a luxury item, is how does it make the person feel? What feelings does it convey? Just like the watch or the car or whatever else. What feeling does it convey? Do you feel, when you look at it, do you feel, oh, I can imagine myself there? And when you walk in, can you picture yourself having coffee in the morning in this corner and having dinner here and, sleeping, waking up in this bedroom and seeing the sunrise and, everything. Yeah, and I love it. For me, it's always, I think the biggest thrill is, in some ways you shouldn't treat it like a game, but of course in some ways it is, you can't resist it, and the thrill of trying to, when you're doing viewings with a client, and it's a serious client, but if you can find them the right thing, and there's this thrill during viewings especially, to get the feeling of, do they like it, do they like it, do they like it? And I learned early on, I was very lucky, I had one colleague who taught me to, you can and you should be chatty when you meet people, when you're talking, when you're in the car with them, whatever. Be chatty, get to know them, listen. But then when you're in the viewing, just give them the bearings where a bit
of liberty.
Bit of initially just an idea of what they're seeing, and then let them go. Shut up and listen and observe. What's the body language? Usually it's husband and wife. Do you like it? Do you like this? especially
The
when they
side
start,
eye from the
especially
wife.
side eye, and especially when they start discussing things they want to change. That's always a good sign,
It's always a good sign.
you
Indeed.
know. So observing these things, and it's a great thrill. Also, it's really fun.
Wow, that was so exciting. I really, really enjoyed your responses. Are you ready for a little challenge?
Okay,
I hope you are because you're a real estate agent.
I'm in real estate. I think we're ready for anything.
Good to know, good to know. I prepared a couple of quick questions for you, and the rule is that you can only respond with one word, if that makes sense to you. So let's give it a try and let's see what will be the best response. If you weren't in real estate, what would you be doing?
Art.
What's your go-to Marbella snack after a showing?
Can I say wine?
Absolutely.
Depends on how the showing went. Yeah.
What's the one thing you cannot live without in Marbella?
Can I say wine again? No. One thing I cannot live without: sunglasses.
That's so typical of you.
Literally cannot.
What's the hardest part of your job?
That's a very good question. I'm really thinking about it. What is the hardest part? It's impossible to answer in a one-word question. I would say it's the fact that it is the fact that for most people, it's not a necessity. So it can be extremely difficult to create that, to get to that point where somebody is ready to make a decision. I would say that's the hardest.
All right. What's the first thing you look for when showing a property?
When showing a property,
The first thing that you would just pick and to guide your clients there.
the wow factor.
Can you name a famous person or a fictional character you'd love to sell a house to?
Well, it is an obvious one, what we discussed before, with, because I have this thing about what do you desire from Lucifer, and I would love to turn the tables on him. So yeah, he could be, and also I can imagine him as a really fun client. And I remember he had a very nice bachelor pad, so I would have great fun finding one for him.
And the last question, what's one thing every luxury real estate agent should have in their toolkit?
You mean a physical toolkit?
Or non-physical?
Patience.
Wow.
Patience. A lot of patience. A lot of patience with everything. You will deal with a lot of incompetence on the way, where you deal with a lot of problems, but also just patience in terms of timeline. You might be in a rush, everybody else is not. So to be able to maintain that patience, and it's especially important because only then you're actually giving a good service to your client. If you are if you are desperate and if you're being pushy, you are not serving your client's best interests. So you've got to be able to have that patience, even if it hurts, which is why wine is very important.
Wow. Thank you so much, Percy. It has been an incredible conversation. I must admit that I really enjoyed it because I'm trying to follow it as much as possible. And I'm always looking for those interesting people that can give some kind of an additional value to anyone who is interested in this area, in the luxury real estate sector, or just generally tracking how the trends have been happening recently. Thank you for your honesty.
Thank
I
you.
think we had a lot of fun, and I hope we'll see you around in some other arrangement.
For sure. My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
a selfish kind of person with a soul trying to fly. I aim to break the laws of nature.